Too Cool Style is a great method for making a baby clothes quilt. It allows you to use small items and intermix them with large items. It makes for a terrific baby clothes quilt. Baby clothes are stretchy, so using this method, which does not require iron-on backing, is going to make a very soft baby clothes quilt. This video course will only look at the unique aspects of using the system to make baby clothes quilts. I'll be referring to information that's available in our standard t-shirt quilt video series. If you have not watched our basic series, I suggest you do so. We have two styles of baby clothes quilts. One simple and one is complex. A simple baby clothes quilt is constructed with blocks from the fabric of the baby clothes. There are no items that would need additional work. So there are no collars, necklines, ruffles, whole items, socks, bibs, or the like. A simple baby clothes quilt is much more complex than a t-shirt quilt because you have a lot of small size blocks and because the material is stretchy. Long arm quilting a baby clothes quilt is more involved because the fabric is a lot stretchier than t-shirt material. A complex baby clothes is, as the title says, complex. The reason a complex baby clothes is complex is because you take pieces from the outfits that include buttons, collars, snaps, ruffles, or any other cute feature of the outfit. In a complex baby clothes quilt, you can include hats, dresses, socks, things with zippers, anything that a child might have worn as a baby. In this video, we're going to focus on the complex baby clothes quilt. We're going to look at cutting the items, sewing them down, sewing them into the quilt, and how to quilt them. The first step in the process of making a baby clothes quilt is to actually start cutting the baby clothes. So we're going to look at a number of different items and how to cut them. So we have this little dress here. I'm going to put a number of different templates on it to see what I want to actually get. So if I want to include the neckline, I need to go with this 8x8, and that's what I'm going to do. But I don't want to just start cutting because I'm going to have not enough room at the shoulders. So I want to cut this piece open. Cut the sleeves off, and then I'm going to do a basic teacup. I'm going to cut down the back of the shirt, and then I'm going to cut down the arms. So I've cut this shirt into a T, and then I can open it up and spread it out. Then I can put my template on the shirt. I want my template below the neckline. I'm just going to fold it open like that. I want to make sure I get the dog in there, and I want to make sure I'm not cutting through any of the snaps. When you cut baby clothes quilts, you really want to keep your template on until you know that you've cut off everything. If you miss something, you could pull your whole thing out of shape. All right, so there's my trash. There's my block. And this block will need backing. If you put a back on the block, then you can open up the shirt when it's in the quilt. Next, let's look at this cute little hat. I'd like to use that in the quilt, but it's really, really thick, so I need to thin it down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over in the back. You've got the seam running all around the hat. I'm going to use that seam as my fold line when I put it onto the block. So I'm simply going to come in and I'm going to cut the excess fabric off. And then I'll pin this down and then sew it down. Now we're going to pin this little hat down. Grab your pins and then think about how you want to have this on your block. You can have it just straight, but that's kind of not very interesting. So I'm going to just cant it a little bit to one direction. And then I simply pin this down. Pins will come out when I sew it down. Be careful when you're handling your blocks after you pin them because you're going to poke yourself. Let's look at these little pants next. I'm going to start by putting my templates on them. And he is just too big for the 4x4. So I'll go by the 4x8 with 8x4, and he's too small. So I need to get more fabric from the back. So I know I can go ahead and cut the legs off and get them out of the way. So now I want to flip him over and cut down the back. One side and then the other side, so you have the crotch opened up. And then you can spread them back out. Now this has elastic in the top here, and that's going to get in my way, so I want to make sure I don't include that elastic. So I'm just going to bring my template down just a little bit. So I know where that template's going to be. Now I want to get rid of this elastic because it's pulling my fabric in. Now when I put him out, he's smoother. So there he is. A complex baby clothes quilt will definitely use little girl dresses. They are so cute and a lot of fun. So to do these, we start with a backing block. Make sure you have it right side up and then the grains going up and down. Next, lay your dress out on the block and see how it fits. All right, so I know how I want it to fit. I know where I want my seams to be. So I grab my pins and I'm going to pin the edges just through the baby dress, not through the block at this point. So now when I flip it over, I know where I need to cut out so that there's not this excess fabric on the block. Make sure you're not cutting all the way through to the front of the dress. Now let's flip it over and take a look at it. I want the neckline to end about here. I don't want to see the back of the dress. So I'm going to, again, pin the neckline down where I want it. Now I'm going to trim off this excess fabric and I'm going to have it so it hides behind the collar here. So now I want to pin the dress to the backing. You can see how much extra time I'm spending on this one item. So that's one of the things you need to consider when you're pricing a baby clothes quilt. So that's ready to be sewn down now. Next, let's look at this cute little pair of pajamas. We have really cute feet that we can use. We have a logo up here we can use, and we also have one on his butt we can use. So let's think about how we want to do this. You can use a 4x4 here, or you could cut across and get the neckline and the button and the zipper. So that's one thing we can think about. We also have the feet and we have the butt. So we can also use the butt as an 8x8, and I think I'll use the 8x8. So now I need to divide the front and the back of this apart so I don't cut one through without the other. If it was a t-shirt, we'd put it on our board, but now we just need to cut it off. So I'm going to put this over the block I want to capture. I'm going to cut the legs off. Watch out for when you're cutting through the zipper. It's a good idea to use an old pair of scissors when you're cutting through a zipper. So now I want to cut up the sides. I'm going to cut across the top. So now I can open this up. All right, so here's my two pieces that I need. You can see how stretchy this material is. So make sure that the material is relaxed when you cut it. I am going to end up with some of this crotch here. This front is really kind of nasty. It's got a lot of spit up on it. It's got a zipper and snap. I'm going to avoid that and just get the strawberry. So I'm going to get my template as close as I can to the snap and to the zipper. I don't want to run my rotary cutter over each or you'll dull your blade. So there's that little strawberry. If you're doing a simple baby clothes quilt, you would just use this and this. But since it's a complex one, we can also include the feet. The feet are really cute. One of the ways I use feet is I grab a piece of material and I'm just going to sew them into the seam allowance. That way they're kind of dangling on the quilt and they're just adorable. So I look at how I want to have that sat. Then I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to cut off my excess. Watch where your pins are so you don't run over your pins. Now this will be just sewn right into the seam allowance, and this will remain dangling free. Next, I want to cut this little jacket here. It's got a lot of fun features to it. It's got a zipper, it's got pockets, it's got a hood. So I want to include this entire thing on the quilt. So I need to cut off the back, but I want to keep part of this inside of the hood. So I need to think about how I'm going to do this. One of the things about baby clothes quilts is you have to think through the entire project of each item before you actually start cutting. So I know that I want this to open up and the zipper to be usable. Yeah, I could just pin the whole thing on and call it good, but it's going to be really thick and not very comfortable to use. So I really want to cut off the back. So when the zipper opens, it'll see my background material. But I also would like to see some of the striped material in the hood. So I need to think about my hood first. I've got a lot of excess material, and I really only need about that much on either side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the hood inside material away from the outside material. Pin along there, so I'm pulling that material apart. So I've got to figure out what to do with this excess material, and I still want to have this back come off. So I'm going to start next by taking the back off. Again, I'm going to use my seams as my fold points. Every single item you use in baby clothes quilt will give you a different challenge. Eventually you'll develop a set of standard, how am I going to do this? I'm going to pin the sides down. Now I need to think about this back of my hood. So I have the inside separated from the outside, and I have it pinned. So that tells me where I want to cut. And I'm going to cut the extra off the back of the hood, but I'm not cutting through to the lining. So now that I've thinned out that, next I need to decide what we're going to see of this material. And I need to really take out some of that excess fabric here. So there's that hood. There's what I want to see. So I really need to put a seam right through here. So I'm just going to cut this off, and then I'm going to pin this. So when I go to sew this down, I'll first sew that excess material down. And then it'll lay flat. I can sew the entire thing down at that point. I'm going to take the little label out. And I probably will also sew right along here. So we'll continue this when we get to our sewing machine. How about a pair of socks? We can use socks in our quilts. These little socks say meow. And we're going to use the same principle that we did on a lot of these other ones, is we're going to go in and we're going to take off the excess fabric. And socks are really easy to do. Again, make sure you're not cutting through to the front side. And then we're going to simply pin him down. Now you can decide if you want to leave the top open or not. I like to leave the tops open because you can actually put your fingers in them, and it's a lot of fun, especially for a little kid looking at their own stuff. Next, let's look at how to sew these down onto their backing materials. One of the challenges you'll find with a baby clothes quilt, whether it's complex or simple, is that you're going to have a lot of small blocks. Counting them becomes an issue. So to resolve this, I simply count in groups of 5. 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I make another group. I do this where I'm actually taking them out of the stack and putting them in a new stack. Sometimes they'll stick together, sometimes a pin will catch. So it's really important because you're going to have so many small pieces that you know exactly how many you have. It'll make your layout and your map making much easier. So continue counting until you know exactly how many of each size you have. Another challenge with baby clothes quilts is because you have so many of these small pieces that you're going to end up having a really complex map. A couple things to think about is you don't want any 4 corners coming together if you can help it. So one of the things you can do when you're cutting is to make sure you cut some 4x12s and 12x4s, 16x12s and 16x4s. This will help break up your design. The other issue is when you go to color it, you're going to have a lot of pink, or if it's a baby boy, it's going to be a lot of blue, and you really need to work hard balancing the colors because you're going to have one pink crayon for everything that's kind of pink. So you're going to have to really think this through as you work through and color it. But you can see from this map there are so many different pieces and so many different blocks that we also cut this into 6 sewing sections instead of 4, so it was easier to work with. The map will be difficult, but it certainly will challenge your creativity. Sewing a baby clothes quilt together is a challenge, and here are some things you really need to pay attention to. First, make sure all your blocks are in right side up. It's easy to flip some upside down, and it's also important to keep the grain going vertical. Don't turn the grain sideways. Next, you need to make sure that you have all the different parts actually caught in the seam. You don't want to have this dangling out of the seam, so check the front and the backs of your seams so you make sure you have caught everything. Other things to look for is make sure if you have something that opens, you actually have a backing on it. Make sure if things sewed down, if you want them sewed down. And remember, this is going to be very stretchy. So as you're sewing, measure your seams. Because if you don't, you're going to get some seams that are going to be really huge and some that will be too small. It's so important to do this. Otherwise, it's going to look skewed and you'll be really disappointed in yourself.